Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
女士们、先生们，大家下午好。
We are about to start the 14th Manila Forum. The Manila Forum is a joint project of the Association for Philippines-China Understanding and the Chinese Embassy here in Manila. And to start our program, let's have the singing of the national anthems of the Republic of the Philippines to be followed by the singing of the national anthem of the People's Republic of China. Kindly stand.
请全体起立，奏唱非中国歌。
Thank you. You may be seated now.
请就坐。
Before we are going to call on the speakers of today's program, please let me acknowledge some personalities who are here today. Later on, the speakers will be properly introduced. But I would like to thank the special envoy of the Office of the President to the People's Republic of China, Ambassador Bennett Chico is here with us this afternoon. We'd also like to acknowledge the former president of the Federation of Filipino-Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry and one of the big supporters of the Associations for Philippines-China Understanding, being a member of the Board of Advisory of APCU, Ambassador Francis Chua. I see very familiar faces here from the academe, from the business sector, and from the different organizations in the Philippines that I would not be able to mention their names and their association one by one. So let's begin the program immediately by calling upon His Excellency, the Ambassador of the People's Republic of China, Wang Xilian, for his welcome remarks.
有请中国驻菲大使黄锡连阁下致辞。
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good afternoon to all of you. It is a true pleasure to be here with both new and old friends at the 14th Manila Forum for China-Philippine Relations. Thank you to our host, the Association for the Philippines-China Understanding, for the strong support, and a warm welcome to the delegation of Chinese scholars led by well-known Professor Victor Gao. The theme today, safeguarding peace and security in the Asia Pacific, captures our common aspiration to deepen mutual understanding and trust, promotes win-win cooperation, advance the reform of global governance, and work hand in hand to uphold peace and stability in our part of the world. 12 years ago, President Xi Jinping, with a keen understanding of global trends and a deep concern for mankind's future, called for the building of a community with a shared future for humanity, lighting the way for a world in search of direction. Since then, China has put forward the Global Development Initiative, the Global Security Initiative, and the Global Civilization Initiative. Together, these three initiatives serve as the pillars of the vision. They have contributed Chinese wisdom to tackling global challenges across multiple dimensions, while injecting much needed stability and positive energy into a world facing challenges and a great deal of uncertainties. Not long ago, China successfully hosted the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin, as well as the commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Chinese people's resistance against Japanese aggression and the World Anti-Fascist War. These events convey a clear message of China's steadfast commitment to upholding international fairness and justice, and underscored the strong momentum towards building a community with a shared future for the mankind. Building on the three major initiatives, President Xi recently further proposed the Global Governance Initiative, for short GGI, offering a practical roadmap for reforming and improving global governance and providing stronger support for our shared future. The GGI rests on 5 core principles, that is, upholding sovereign equality, abiding by international law, practicing a multilateralism, embracing a people-centered approach, and focusing on concrete action. This initiative aligns with the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, responds to the common aspirations of people in all countries, and addresses pressing needs of today's world. Since its launch, the GGI has been welcomed and supported by leaders of many countries and international organizations, and it is destined to gain broader support and recognition from international community. This initiative is a natural response to the trends of our time. Today, the world is undergoing profound and accelerated changes unseen in a century. Emerging markets and developing countries are rising together, bringing about a historic shift in the international balance of power. This has created strong impetus for reforming the global governance system. At the same time, the calls of the Global South for peace, development, and cooperation are growing louder, while the urgency to improve the global governance and redress historical injustices continues to mount. Born in this context, The GGI responds to the challenges of our times and charts a course for transformation. The initiative is a right choice for addressing our common challenges. Around the world, hegemonic and bullying practices, say using strength to intimidate the weak, seizing benefits through force or deceit, and playing zero-sum games, are causing a serious harm. The deficits in peace, development, security, and governance continue to widen, posing unprecedented challenges to humanity. No country can remain unaffected. Only through cooperation can we strengthen our collective resilience against external risks and pursue shared development. The 5 core principles of the GGI are deeply rooted in China's fine tradition culture and carry forward the best traditions of its diplomacy. They reject the outdated logic of zero-sum games and winner takes all, and rise above Western centrism and notions of civilizational or racial superiority. At the same time, they add new dimensions to China's traditional worldview and to Marxist theories of world history, offering fresh, values-based guidance for global governance. In a world marked by turbulence and transformation, peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific are especially precious. It is our shared responsibility to preserve and safeguard this situation. As a member of the Asia-Pacific region, China has long shared a common destiny with its neighbors, remains committed to promoting regional peace and stability, as well as building a community with a shared future for the mankind. With a shared future along with our neighboring countries. Looking ahead, China will continue to work hand in hand with regional partners to champion the Asian values of peace, cooperation, openness, and inclusiveness, resolutely upholding international fairness and justice, and serving as a source of stability in a turbulent world. Taking this opportunity, I would like to share a few ideas in the hope of inspiring further reflection and dialogue. First, with evolving theories on international order, we now see 2 contrasting schools of thoughts, one grounded in international law and another one based on so-called rules. To be specific, so-called rules-based order and international law-based order. The latter raises important question on exactly what and whose rules is this rules-based order founded? How do these rules relate to the established framework of international law? And ultimately, what kind of international order does the world at large and our region in particular truly need? Second, as the Ukraine and other crises continue to spill over, some countries have sought to replicate bloc confrontation in the Asia-Pacific by promoting the idea of an Asia-Pacific NATO. Faced with such divisive intentions, we must ask, what sort of security architecture does our region require? One that is exclusive, built only on military alliances, or one that is distinctly Asian, featuring shared security, respect for diversity, and active dialogue. Today, we are happy to welcome distinguished scholars from both China and the Philippines. We look forward to meaningful exchanges and that will generate fresh insights and help build greater consensus. In closing, I sincerely wish this event every success. Thank you, and Mabuhay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Huang. 非常感谢黄锡联大使的致辞。
Before we introduce our keynote speakers and other speakers, let me have this opportunity to introduce the able men and women of the Association for Philippines-China Understanding. And please stand up if I call your name. We have here APCU President Sixto Benedicto. We also have here the other members of the Board of Trustees. I call first with retired Police Colonel Joe Roncesvalles, who's seated there. We also have here retired Police General Fernando Pazit, the Treasurer of APCU. We have two of the most prestigious media personalities here. Trustee Adolfo Paglinawan and Trustee Herman Chiu Laurel, and one of our lady trustees here, Madam Mafi Chai, and one of the youngest successful businessmen from Northern Luzon, Mr. Fernando Chong. So they are the men and women behind APCU.
欢迎各位非中了解协会的领导，欢迎你们。
Let me now introduce for today's forum. We have assembled the remarkable cast of academicians, experts, and scholars on regional and international issues to lead the discussion and exploration of the topic at hand. Ensuring continuing peace and security in the Asia-Pacific region.
今天论坛的主题是守护亚太地区和平与安全。那么今天我们非常荣幸地迎来了很多知名的专家来为我们讲话。
Let me introduce first our guests, three panelists from abroad who come from prestigious institutions. First is Professor Victor Gao. He is a lawyer. Now he's a professor of Suzhou University, vice president of the Center for China and Globalization, and chairman of the China Energy Security Institute. He has held senior roles in diplomacy, law, investment banking, and corporate leadership, including Morgan Stanley, CICC, and CNOOC. With decades of experience in global finance and energy, Professor Gao has advised major institutions worldwide. He holds advanced degrees from Yale University and Beijing and is a licensed lawyer in New York. Professor Victor Gao.
今天第一位的特邀嘉宾是高志凯教授，他是现任苏州大学的特聘教授，是全球化智库的副主任，同时担任中国能源安全研究院的院长。他曾在外交、法律、投资银行、企业管理等多个领域任职，并积累丰富的经验，包括摩根士丹利、CICC 等机构以及中海油等大型企业的高管职务。他在耶鲁法学院取得法学博士学位，在北京外国语大学获得硕士学位，曾在美国纽约取得律师执业的资格。
Please welcome with a round of applause our first keynote speaker, Professor Victor Gao.
掌声有请主旨演讲嘉宾高志凯先生。
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This is truly my greatest honor to be here. And let me give my respect to His Excellency Ambassador Huang from China and so many other excellencies and so many other distinguished guests, not only from the Philippines, but also from China, from many other countries. Yes, I did go to Yale, and I got a JD degree from Yale Law School. And I was thinking, going to Yale actually is one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated with the Philippines. Let me tell you why. Because the first governor of the Philippines after 1898 was Mr. Taft. He was from Yale, and he was the first governor of the United States in the Philippines, and he actually laid the foundation for how Philippines developed into a modern society. He played a crucial role in charting out all the rules and the regulations, which eventually became the fabric of the Philippines. Later, of course, you may know that Mr. Taft not only became a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, he also became a President of the United States. And he is the first President of the United States with education from Yale. So in that sense, whenever I looked at the Philippines, I thought about Mr. Taft, the first US governor of the United States in the Philippines. We all together have 5 presidents of the United States with educational background from Yale, including President Ford in the 1970s, President George H.W. Bush, and President Clinton, of course, and President Bush the Jr. Now you may know the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, was also from Yale Law School. I was class of 1993. He was class of 2013. I was 20 years ahead of J.D. Vance. And if things go right, J.D. Vance actually may or may not, you never know, be the next president of the United States. Therefore, from my perspective, from China, being a Chinese, lots of experience in the United States, being licensed as a lawyer in the state of New York, and with Mr. Taft being my alumni and the first governor of the Philippines, it truly gives me very extraordinary perspective when I look at the Philippines. And I consider everyone here in this very distinguished audience as my friends. And allow me to mention one point before I start my presentation. I truly believe China and the Philippines, for thousands of years, we got along with each other very well, without war, without conflict, without confrontation. And let me share with you what my firm belief. I believe for many thousands of years to come in the future, I'm convinced China and the Philippines will remain close neighbors and very good friends. Now, we are living in the present. At present, there are some ups and downs in our bilateral relations, of course. We need to deal with these tensions, which, if left unattended, may actually flare up into major crisis, which will not be good for China or for the Philippines. But I truly believe, being the two very close neighbors just across a body of water, it gives all the incentives to the Chinese people and the Filipino people to deal with each other as equal and to be very constructive in our relations with each other. Allow me to start my presentation. I first came to the Philippines back in 1993 when I was a lawyer in the Wall Street, working for a distinguished American law firm. Now, I came here to work on the convertible bond issue by Robinson Department Store. I worked as a lawyer. Later, I worked as a banker with Morgan Stanley. And we had very good business in the Philippines. Now, back in 1993 and 1994, let me tell you the real truth. The Philippines, or at least Manila, which I visited at that time, was much more advanced and much more developed than most of China. At that time, the Philippines was considered one of the most developed countries in this part of Asia, one of the leading nations in the ASEAN framework, whatever it was called at that time, and a country with great expectation and with great aspirations. And at that time, if I remember correctly, China was very poor, very not developed. But if we fast forward to today, 2025, China is already the largest economy. If we use purchasing power parity, China is about 135% that of the United States. In terms of the official exchange rate, China is next only to the United States. My belief is that in another 5 to 10 years, the size of the Chinese economy, if we still use official exchange rate, will be larger than the United States. And if you believe in Elon Musk, he keeps saying by the middle of this century, China will be about twice the size of the US economy. So we are living in a fast-changing world. We can compare China and the Philippines back in 1993, 1995. We can compare China and the Philippines today. We can compare China versus the United States today in terms of purchasing power parity or official exchange rate. But we can also look forward into the future. Let's say by 2050, just imagine for the Filipinos, you always have very strong relations with the United States for whatever reason, ever since 1898. And then the United States by 2050 will remain one of the most important and consequential countries in the world. But then, just across a body of water, you have China as one of your biggest neighboring country, twice as big as the United States in terms of the size of the economy. So my idea and my contribution to my friends in the Philippines is to be friendly with the United States and be friendly with China. It will be suicidal if we want to be friend with one and an enemy with the other, because that's not going to help the fundamental interest of the Philippines. Be friends with both China and the United States probably will be the best strategy for the Philippines. Now, another point I want to share with you. I traveled to more than 100 countries in the world, and I truly believe Philippines is one of the countries which has all the natural endowments and the geographical location which will make the people in the Philippines one of the wealthiest nations in the world. Look at the country. Look at your geopolitical position. Look at the fact that you are just a body of water away from China, a body of water a little bit further from Japan, and across the Pacific Ocean from the United States. You should be in the hub of everything going from east to west, from north to south. What is missing, according to my observation, is what China has been doing ever since 1978. Let me share with you. Just now, one of you mentioned I worked for Deng Xiaoping as his interpreter. Yes, I worked for Deng Xiaoping for more than 20 of his very important meetings with foreign visiting dignitaries. Now, Deng Xiaoping told us to focus only on several things. One is to maintain domestic stability at any cost. If you do not have domestic stability, you cannot develop. And look at the Philippines. You need to maintain your domestic stability, of course. Then the second point, equally, if not more importantly, keeping peace in the world. It doesn't mean that China can dictate peace to many countries in the world, but it means that China wants to avoid getting involved in any war with anyone in the world. Because without peace, you cannot have domestic stability. And without peace and without stability, you cannot get your economy developed. Then the third point is even more important. Let me share with you this open secret. Deng Xiaoping always said, development is the hard truth. Now, we believe in development since 1978 as the hard truth which guides everything we do. Forget about pure politics, forget about geopolitics, for example, forget about many other things. Just keep focused on development. When I travel in the Philippines, I always remind myself, if I have a chance to tell my Filipino friends, and if I can only say one thing, that is, development is the hard truth. If you do not develop, no one will wait for you. You will be left behind. Just look at other ASEAN member states. Laos has built railway connection. Indonesia has built fast rail tracks linking from Bandung to Jakarta, and they are expanding that to the east and to the west. Look at Thailand, they are building railway connections. Look at Vietnam, they are connecting their northern border with China all the way to Cambodia. Look at so many other countries. They are building, they are connecting, they are building up their connectivity. And if we look at the Philippines, one thing which really pains me is that Filipino people deserve to develop and deserve to treat development as the hard truth, as we do. We in China even today still believe development is the hard truth. Of course, back 46 years ago, we talked about modernization of our agriculture, industry, national defense, and science and technology. Now, back in China, we talk about kind of tongue twister. We call it new qualitative productivity, meaning everything using science and technological breakthrough need to guide whatever we do as an economy. And in this regard, let me share with you, AI becomes more and more important. Now, you know, back in January, out of Hangzhou in China, there was a major breakthrough. It's called the DeepSeek. I published an op-ed after the DeepSeek event. I mentioned 2 points. Allow me to share with you. One is that AI does not mean American intelligence. Really, I really mean it. It's not rocket science. AI does not mean American intelligence. AI means artificial intelligence for the benefit of all, developed by all, and participated by all countries involved. But if any one country wants to build up AI dominance, do you know what will be the consequence? No one should allow any country to build up AI dominance. And I always tell my friends in the United States, including many from Yale University or from Yale Law School, don't build up American AI dominance as if AI is American intelligence. Because if any one country achieves dominance in AI, holy cow, it will dominate the world. It will destroy this polarity in the world of today. You may say, Victor Gao, polarity in the world? No, there is one country which has unipolarity in the world. But you are wrong, you are absolutely wrong. Because this year, we are celebrating the 80th year anniversary of the founding of the United Nations back in 1945. Do you know the world order established back in 1945 after the unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany and the unconditional surrender of Japanese fascism was actually multipolar in its nature. Just look at the United Nations Security Council with 5 permanent member states China, the United States, former Soviet Union, now Russia, the United Kingdom, and France, each with a veto power, meaning these 5 permanent member states check and balance each other, preventing any one country from achieving dominance. Why? Do you know why? You need to ask why. Because the rule of the thumb is that if any one single country achieves dominance of the world, it may enslave all the other countries, it may hold a gun at your head, it may issue ultimatum to you, it may force you to kowtow, kneel down, it may actually go back to the rule of the jungle rather than rule of civilization. So we are living in a fast-changing world. I believe this so-called reciprocal tariff war demonstrates that no country should be allowed to achieve dominance of the world. Now, ever since April the 2nd, I've been interviewed on multiple occasions, and I've declared in my own humble capacity that the tariff war launched by the United States is the wrong war, and the United States government is holding a gun at everyone's head. For example, I proclaimed that this is the wrong war, but so many countries basically could not resist the maximum pressure from the United States until one appeals court in the United States, through its ruling, declared most of the elements of the global reciprocal tariff war launched by the United States are illegal and even unconstitutional in the United States. Of course, that forces the Trump administration to rush the case to the Supreme Court of the United States, and the United States has decided to do an urgent review of the situation. They've scheduled sometime in October, next month, to review this very, very extraordinary case, whereby the appeals court in the United States ruled against the government of the United States, declaring the tariff war as illegal and unconstitutional. So I think we need to wait until the final ruling of the Supreme Court of the United States, and whatever decision of the Supreme Court, I think we all need to do the right thing. That is, to protect free trade. I hope China will protect free trade. The Philippines will also protect free trade. All the ASEAN 10 countries will protect free trade, because free trade deserves to be protected. Without free trade, and free trade includes free trade in goods as well as free trades in services, the Philippines earns a lot of income through free trade in services. So in that sense, we are all in the same boat. We all need to rise up and defend free trade, either free trade in goods or free trade in services. Now, we are also living in a world in the sense that we are at a threshold of peace versus war. Now you see so many wars, in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, and whoever that is behind Ukraine, sometimes you say, well, the United States was behind the Ukraine. And now President Trump said, if I were president of the United States back in 2022, the war would never have happened. And President Putin in Alaska on August the 18th also declared that if His Excellency President Trump were the president of the United States in 2022, the war in Ukraine would never have happened. So what exactly is the problem with the war in Ukraine? The war in Gaza. So many people killed. More than 70 million innocent people, civilians, were killed. 3/4 of them, men and women and children, for example. It's horrific. And we have other wars against Iran, and amazingly, war between India and Pakistan, for example, involving one of the largest scale aerial battle, probably since Vietnam War. And in the middle of all this, the Ambassador Huang from China also mentioned just now, on September the 2nd, there was big celebration in Beijing, attended by about 27 heads of states and heads of government from so many other countries, and many other deputy prime minister, ministers of all kinds, foreign ministers from more than 180 countries in the world were all gathered in Tiananmen Square to celebrate what? Two things. One was the 80th year anniversary of the victory of the Chinese people's war of resistance against Japanese aggression. And the second was the 80th anniversary of world's anti-fascism war. Both ended in August and September 1945. So, we are living in the world today, and the world order we are living in through was not established today, was not established yesterday. It was not established after the end of the Cold War in 1991. It was, allow me to mention, established back in 1945 when Japanese fascism was defeated, when Nazi Germany was defeated. Now, in this context, allow me to mention one point. China made the greatest sacrifice, and we did most of the heavy lifting to defeat fascism. Why? Because for the United States, the war against Japan was less than 4 years. For China, the war of resistance against Japanese aggression started in 1931, and it lasted 14 years. At the height of the Japanese occupation, Japan occupied about half of the Chinese landmass, and they closed off almost all the Chinese coastline. Japan wanted to defeat China. Japan wanted to wipe out the Chinese culture, wipe out the Chinese civilization. They claimed that the Japanese nation was the finest example of the civilization in our part of the world. This actually forced everyone in China to rise up to commit to defeating the Japanese aggressors. Let me share with you, the Second World War was not the Second European War. I was shocked to hear some European leaders pretending that they are shocked that China said China made a lot of contribution to defeating fascism. Let me tell that lady in Brussels, don't be shocked. Without China fighting against Japanese aggression for 14 years in a row, sacrificing more than 35 million people, my nationals, the Chinese nationals, let me tell you, Japan and Nazi Germany may actually pool their resources and attack Soviet Union and really establish their gridlock on the Eurasian continent. And if Japan completely defeated China, or if China really surrendered as, pardon me, I hope there is no Frenchman here, as France did in the Second World War, you know, at the height of the Japanese aggression, they had more than 4 million Japanese soldiers occupying China. If Japan forced China to surrender, Japan would be able to reallocate all their soldiers from the China theater to fight against the Americans in the Pacific theater. I think we will be living in a completely different world. And in this sense, allow me to mention, after Pearl Harbor, the Philippines was subjugated to Japanese occupation for about 4 years. So in that sense, the Chinese people and the Filipino people, we should be allies together because we suffered the same scourge and we fought against the same fascist regime in Tokyo. Now, in the world of today, you also hear lots of people talk about destined for war, implying that between China and the United States, these two countries are destined for war. And that theory, the Thucydides trap theory, was proposed by one very eminent professor from Harvard. Fortunately, he's not from Yale. Otherwise, I probably would not say what I'm going to say. He said, based on his analysis of cases of war, he came up with a theory of Thucydides trap, implying China and the United States are destined to fight a war against each other. Now, I felt uncomfortable with his theory from very beginning, not because he was from Harvard, I went to Yale. I thought something must be wrong in his theory. And now, standing here in Manila, in front of all the distinguished excellencies, let me tell you, I now call that theory, destined for war theory, applied to China and the United States, as a fallacy. Why? Why do I call it as a fallacy? Because he analyzed all the cases of war which were conventional wars, and he wanted to apply his theory to China and the United States, two very important conventional powers, of course, but also two very important nuclear weapon countries. I remember what I learned from Yale PhD program. Between nuclear power states, you never fight a war. Because if you fight a war, you will have MAD, mutually assured destruction. So anyone trying to instigate a war between China and the United States may force mankind to stare into Armageddon right away. That leaves me to my theory. Allow me to share with you. I called it inevitability of peace between China and the United States. You know, whether the United States like China or not, that's another thing. But China and the United States eventually will need to live in peace. Whatever problems they have, they need to resolve them in peace, in negotiation, in diplomacy. That's why, if you have not watched the Victory Day parade in Beijing on September the 3rd, one of the weapons China demonstrated is a missile with all the warheads. We call it 61 because it can contain 60 nuclear warheads plus one hydrogen bomb. Now, in the world of today, let me tell you, which country has hydrogen bomb? China is the only country with hydrogen bomb. And that ICBM can cover every corner of the world in less than 20 minutes and destroy any target in any corner of the world without any possibility of being intercepted. I hope Washington has learned the lesson. They know, as I declared in my interview with Abrams of the United States, very distinguished American, I basically told him, if you want to have war, you will get war. If you want to destroy China, you will be destroyed. If you want to impose nuclear war on China, you will be wiped out by nuclear war. This is very serious. China's policy is very clear. China will not fire the first shot, but China will not allow you to fire the second shot. That's why, while I'm pained to see the confrontation between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea, I also feel blessed that they are only using water cannons against each other. Make no mistake, China has more lethal things than water cannons. But I hope we will only use water cannon and we will not escalate and we will never use real ammunition between China and the Philippines. Now, Mr. Abrams also challenged me, saying that China's military buildup is a challenge, a threat to our neighboring countries. I told him point blank, no country in China's neighborhood is a match against China in terms of military power. China's military buildup is a matchup against only one country, that is the United States. China will never allow the United States to launch a war against China, conventional or nuclear, without suffering devastating consequences. Now, I mention this with one purpose. I hope people in China and people here in the Philippines will look at ourselves and each other as friends rather than as enemies. I don't believe there is any one single enemy in China against the Philippines. We all love Philippines. Everyone I know wants to come to Philippines as a tourist, for example, to taste your beautiful cuisine And there are so many things of great interest, great attraction to the Philippines. And if the Philippines is really committed to treating development as the hard truth, to build up your connectivity, financial connectivity, technological connectivity, and also AI connectivity of all kinds, let me tell you, China is the best country for you to work with, because China has the largest financial pool, China has the largest manufacturing capabilities, and China can really work with the Philippines completely as equal. We will not look down upon the Philippines. We will look at the Filipino people individually, as a nation, as a country, completely as equals. We will never hold a gun at anyone in the Philippines. That is the reality. Now, the United States is great in many other senses, of course, but do you really think the United States will come to the Philippines with money and with manufacturing contribution? They are really depleting their own manufacturing capabilities. Their shipbuilding is really a shadow of what it used to be, and they are now working with the Republic of Korea to make up for the deficiencies in the United States for their manufacturing deficiencies. Allow me also to mention, because whenever I come to the Philippines, many people in the Philippines talk about arbitration. I am an arbitrator in an arbitration tribunal. It's called Asian International Arbitration Tribunal, headquartered in Singapore. The story is too long. I do not want to go into details to avoid bothering you. But allow me just to make one point. Arbitration without consent is a violation of the rule of law. I say this as an alumni from Yale Law School. I say this as an attorney at law, licensed in the state of New York. I also say this as a Chinese national. I can bring you to court whether you agree it or not, but I will never be able to drag you into arbitration without your consent, because arbitration without consent is a violation of rule of law. So no one in the world should expect and indulge in the fantasy that you can drag one country. It's not a small country, not an inconsequential country. It's a big country. It's one of the countries which made the biggest contribution to defeating fascism in 1945 into arbitration without its consent. Come on. You don't want to do that. You do not want to violate the basic tenet of the rule of law. So I hope you will walk away from today's meeting believing, as I have always believed, arbitration without consent is a violation of the rule of law. We want to have rule of law, but we don't want to have arbitration without consent. And that is also a very important thing. I also want to mention one thing which you may consider that as controversial, because I mentioned President Taft, the first governor of the United States in the Philippines, and I kept reading the Spanish-American Treaty of 1898. Now, if you go to that treaty, in English as well as in Spanish, there is one very explicit clause saying the territory of the Philippines to be transferred by the Empire of Spain to the United States of America on the west side of the territory should not go beyond 118-degree longitude. That means that treaty, which is the birthright of the Philippines in the modern time, had its western border clearly defined, carved in stone in that Spanish-American Treaty of 1898. So I hope no one in the world should be pretending that they cannot read the Spanish-American Treaty of 1898. I read it many times, partially because I knew Governor Taft was very much involved in coming up with all the rules and the regulations for the Philippines after the takeover of the Philippines by the United States from Spain in 1898. So I think when we really talk about the realities in the world, we need to go back into history. And as far as the Philippines is concerned, we, from the Chinese perspective, I do not need to go all the way into antiquity, into 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. No, we just need to go back to 1898. We just need to look at the fateful thing which happened in 1898 when Spain transferred the totality of the territory of the Philippines to the United States of America. And soon afterwards, Mr. Taft became the first governor of the United States of America in the Philippines. Now, I mention all this with only one purpose. That is, for me, Philippines is and will always be a friendly country for my motherland, and I will always urge for friendship between China and the Philippines. When we look at the title of our meeting today, Continuing Peace and Continuing Security, I thought one word was missing. That is sustainable development, because we need peace and security for their own purposes, but without peace and security, we cannot develop. So I think between China and the Philippines, we need peace, we need security, we need to have the legitimate boundary of the Philippines protected legally, and we want to have sustainable development for the Philippines. I really dream that the Philippines will achieve as much development as China has been making since 1978, when Deng Xiaoping became the paramount leader of China. I'm writing a biography entitled Interpreting Deng Xiaoping. So next time, if you really want to understand what Deng Xiaoping was, what his implications are today, I'll be very happy to share with you. But one thing is for sure, without peace, neither China nor the Philippines can develop, and without development, the Chinese people will be unhappy, and the people here in the Philippines will not be happy, especially when you look at your neighboring country being on the fast track, developing by leaps and bounds. It is time for the Philippines to really wake up and treat development as your hard truth, as we in China treated development as our hard truth ever since 1978. I thank you very much for your patience. Long live the Philippines.
Thank you so much, Professor Victor Gao. 非常感谢赵志凯教授。
Well, Professor Gao mentioned about AI. Well, it's not American intelligence. Maybe we can call it Asian intelligence, you know. After listening from that very comprehensive discourse of Professor Gao, it's about time to listen also to one of our speakers. He was former chief of the Philippine Army. He was former chief of staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. And when he retired, he became member of the cabinet as the head of the presidential management staff of former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. And then he became the national security advisor of former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. He visited China several times during the time of President Duterte. And let's welcome retired General Hermes Esperon, Jr.
下一位演讲嘉宾是前菲律宾军部部长、前菲律宾武装部队参谋长、前阿罗约总统内阁成员，他是总统管理办公室的部长， 他也是前菲律宾国家安全顾问，以及现任的菲律宾信用银行董事长。请大家热烈欢迎 General Hermes Esperon Jr.
I am now the next speaker to Mr. Victor Gao, who did it in 40 minutes. I hope to do it in 39 minutes. No, but perhaps 15 minutes. Promise. Distinguished colleagues, members of the Diplomatic Corps, led by Ambassador Francis Chua, my good friend, fellow speakers and panelists, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am honored to speak before the 14th Manila Forum for Philippine-China Relations. And I would like to extend my sincerest thanks to Attorney Raul Lambino for the invitation from the Association for Philippine-China Understanding. By the way, I have some slides, power presentation at your back. I was hoping that it would be here, but I hope from time to time you would look at my slides in the two screens at the on my left. As someone who has served both as a general and as the National Security Advisor of the Philippines, I welcome this opportunity to share some hard-earned lessons on maintaining peace and stability in the region. Today, I speak to you not from a singular perspective, but from a confluence of experience in military operations, in government policy, and in navigating sensitive diplomatic waters. And I will center my remarks around three interrelated themes: internal strength and resilience, practicing assertive restraint, and cultivating a culture of security. Let me begin with the foundation: internal strength and resilience. A nation cannot project peace outwardly if it is struggling internally. This was a core tenet of our national security policy during my tenure as National Security Advisor. We prioritized the dismantling of domestic terrorist networks and launched the National Task Force to End the Local Communist Armed Conflict, where I was the vice chairman to President Duterte. It wasn't just a military campaign. It was a whole-of-nation effort. We engaged local governments, civil society, and the private sector to address the root causes of unrest and foster lasting stability. True national security begins with internal cohesion. Only when a nation is unified from within can it effectively project credibility and engage in meaningful diplomacy. The current national security policy and strategy underscore the critical nexus between security and economic development. recognizing that the two are not only interdependent, but also mutually reinforcing. In today's complex environment, internal cohesion cannot be achieved through military strength alone. It requires inclusive growth, resilient institutions, and equitable access to opportunities. By aligning security objectives with economic initiatives, the policy and aim to foster stability from within, reduce vulnerabilities to external threats, and build a more unified and resilient society. This integrated approach reflects a broader understanding that sustainable peace is rooted in the well-being and empowerment of our people. It is the foundation of internal strength and national resilience. Internal strength empowers us to uphold sovereignty without escalating conflict. And this leads me to the second key point: the practice of assertive restraint, which is a strategic posture that balances firm resolve with measured diplomacy. The West Philippine Sea has long been a flashpoint, and as the former head of the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea, I have personally dealt with the presence of foreign maritime militia vessels, frequently swarming Pag-asa Island and Ayungin Shoal. In each instance, our response was measured yet resolute. We filed diplomatic protests, we mobilized regional partnerships, and we maintained operational readiness without succumbing to provocation. The principle of assertive restraint calls for standing firm in defense of our rights, including the landmark 2016 arbitral ruling and the provisions of United Nations Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, while resisting the impulse to escalate tensions. It is a strategy rooted in legal legitimacy, moral ascendancy, and strategic discipline, demonstrating that resolve and restraint can coexist in the pursuit of regional peace and stability. As an example, our pursuit of maritime and border cooperation with Indonesia and Malaysia exemplifies how trust-based collaboration can yield tangible security gains. By jointly securing our shared maritime borders, we not only deter transnational threats such as piracy, smuggling, and terrorism, but also reinforce mutual confidence and operational synergy among our forces. These initiatives reflect the power of collaborative frameworks rooted in trust, transparency, and shared responsibility, which are the key pillars of a stable and resilient Indo-Pacific. Today, we are building a community of like-minded nations united by a shared commitment to peace, stability, mutual respect, and the rule of law. As the respected former speaker, Mr. Gao, would say, the rule of law. Through strengthened partnerships and enhanced defense cooperation, we aim to build collective capabilities that not only safeguard our sovereignty, but also serve as a credible deterrent against unwanted aggression. Yet, even as we strengthen our collective defense posture, we remain guided by the principle of assertive restraint, a deliberate and disciplined approach that balances firmness with responsibility. It reflects our commitment to uphold international law, avoid unnecessary escalation, and pursue peaceful resolution of disputes. In doing so, we demonstrate that strength and stability are best achieved not through provocation, but through principled action and unwavering resolve or assertive restraint. However, a credible defense posture with diplomacy is not enough. We must also foster what I call a culture of security. Security should not live solely in the realm, in the domain of generals and or diplomats. It must be embedded in the fabric of our societies. When we launch our internal security campaigns, we involve the youth, media, academia, and the religious institutions. They were not just bystanders. They were not bystanders. They were stakeholders. Building on this, the current national security policy and strategy are being rolled out not only to align government programs with our national interests, but also to cultivate a deeper societal awareness that national security is not merely the responsibility of the state. It is a shared mindset essential to peace and development. By embedding national security consciousness into everyday governance and civic life, we aim to foster a culture of vigilance, resilience, and proactive engagement. This holistic approach ensures that every sector contributes to a stable and secure environment where development can thrive. The security mindset anchored on mutual respect must now be embraced across the Indo-Pacific, serving as a cornerstone for building a peaceful, prosperous, resilient, and inclusive region. As nations confront shared challenges, from territorial disputes to transnational threats, the adoption of a common strategic outlook rooted in vigilance, cooperation, common good, and responsible statecraft becomes essential. By fostering a culture of security, it is viewed that this culture is not only a defense imperative, but also as a development enabler. We can collectively shape then an Indo-Pacific where stability and progress can go hand in hand. Let us not forget, for example, that ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, despite its limitations, has played a crucial role in preventing major conflicts through consensus and dialogue. However, as security challenges in the region grow more complex, ASEAN's emphasis on sociocultural and economic integration has left a noticeable gap in its security architecture. Strengthening ASEAN's culture of security is essential, not only to safeguard and sustain the economic gains that it has achieved, but also to ensure that it remains a credible and effective contributor to peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. To conclude, peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific will not be achieved by one nation or one strategy alone. We must strengthen our nations from within to allow it to act with principled and assertive restraint. Above all, we must nurture a collective security culture, one that is inclusive, adaptive, respectful, and forward-looking. Only through shared commitment and strategic cooperation can we shape a region defined not by rivalry, but by resilience, cooperation, and lasting peace. Let us ensure that integrated diplomacy is not merely a reaction, but a posture of readiness. Let us demonstrate that strength and peace are not opposing forces, but enduring partners in shaping a secure and prosperous future. And let us remember that diplomacy without a credible military strength is an invitation to assertiveness by opposing forces. This brings me to the instruments of national power as shown. I am sure that most of you here are familiar with these instruments of national power. These are diplomatic or diplomacy, as embodied by Ambassador Tiglao and Francis Chua and Ambassador Huang. Informational, again embodied by Ambassador Tiglao as a former spokesperson. Military, we are here, many of us are here. I just saw the former Defense Secretary, General Lorenzana. Welcome back. We have the economic instrument of national power. We all know that. Mr. Gao talked a lot about economy. We have legal and law enforcement. We have many of our police officers here and from the judiciary. You know that. Just on time, partner. We have intelligence, which must be differentiated from information. Intelligence is one of the coordinating elements of national power, as they all are. Finance is an instrument that we must not forget. The stronger the peso is, the better we are in auditing projects and budgets, the better we are. And development. Mr. Gao, this is your line. Development. Development. A big instrument of national power. If we cannot develop, we can never be powerful. Remember that, development. I hope I will be given another time to discuss this in detail, but for now, in closing, I can only say that a nation's strength lies in the strategic integration of its instruments of national power. when aligned with purpose and principle, they become the foundation of national resilience and global influence, and can meaningfully contribute to peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak before you today. Maraming salamat. Mabuhay. Xi.
Thank you so much, General Esperon.
Thank you, Secretary Esperon, for that wonderful presentation of what would ensure peace and security in the Asia-Pacific region, and also with the speech of Professor Gao, sustainable development is really essential. Before we continue with the forum, let's have a short coffee break, and we are going to ask our ushers to bring up the chairs there, and we are going to call the other reactors together with our two keynote speakers to come up the stage. And let's have about 10 minutes coffee and tea break. So relax for a few minutes. And I will take this opportunity to again acknowledge the arrival and presence of former Defense Secretary Delphine Lorenzana, my mentor in golf. Well, he was former military attaché of the Philippines in the United States. And then when he retired from the Armed Forces of the Philippines, he opted to join the cabinet of former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte as Defense Secretary. And then he became chairman of the Basis Conversion Development Authority under the present administration before he decided to get out of government service and just like me, play golf if there's a chance. So let's have a short coffee break and tea break. Enjoy yourselves.
好，现在我们将进行茶歇，欢迎大家在外面享用茶、咖啡，还有几个小点心。 Resuming our program shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats as we will be resuming our program shortly. 女士们、先生们，请就座。活动即将在开始。
Hello. May we request everyone to please go back to your respective tables and chairs as we are going to resume our forum. Our additional panelists and speakers, which will give them 5 minutes each to speak while they are seated here, are first we have Dr. Su Hao. He is Director of the Center for Strategy and Peace Studies of the China Foreign Affairs University. May I request Dr. Su Hao to please come up the stage?
我们下一位演讲的嘉宾是苏浩先生，外交学院战略和平研究中心主任。
We also have Mr. Ding Ho. He is Director of the Research Center for International and Regional Issues of the National Institute for South China Sea Studies. May I request Professor Du to please come up the stage?
下一位是中国南海研究院区域国别研究所所长丁铎，请您上台就座。
And the last but not the least panelist, we have our multi-awarded journalist and newspaper columnist. He was former cabinet member of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, being the press secretary and spokesman, and former ambassador of the Philippines to Athens during the time, no other than His Excellency Ambassador Rigoberto Bobetiglau. Gentlemen, please come up the stage. Together with our two keynote speakers, General Hermes Esperon, sir, please come up the stage, and Professor Victor Gao, please come up the stage and join our other panelists.
下一位是前总统发言人 Ambassador Rigoberto Tiglao， 也请您一起上台，以及刚才的2位主旨演讲嘉宾高志凯先生以及 Secretary Hermes Esperon 先生，请你们一起上台，谢谢。
So the format of this roundtable discussion is that we'll give first our 3 panelists to respond to the 2 keynote speeches of Professor Gao and General Esperon. Not more than 5 minutes response to the speeches made by Dr. Gao and General Esperon. Our first speaker would be Dr. Su Hao. Please, Dr. Su Hao, respond to the speeches of our keynote speakers. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to be here in Manila in this, to meet our distinguished friends here. And actually, I have been here for several times as a visiting professor for the conference or even tourist in the south of Philippines. So by this kind of experiences, make me a very deep impression about this great country. Not only is there as a maritime state, beautiful, sceneries, much wonderful beach, blue sky, and the green water, and also the great land. So this is great country. Actually, my hometown is in Yunnan province of China, down to the southwest of China. It is inland, deep inland of China. So I'm quite familiar with the mountain, the inland, the land, but not the sea. Of course, later on I'm studying and working in Beijing and stayed there for more than 40 years. So I think that's China, on the one hand, is inland, grassland, very vast landscape, but also as the coastal lines of China, close to Beijing. So this also is the very wide range of the maritime area. So combines the land and the sea. So that means China, on the one hand, is a land country or a land power. But on the others, China is also the maritime sea or maritime is the scope of the, the territorial land, but also it is the sea power somehow, right? So I think that's China. As you know, just a few weeks ago, we have the summit in Tianjin, which is one of the important cities in China, hosted their summit called Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This mechanism must be focused on the inland of Eurasian continent. So we discussed quite a lot of their cooperation around their inland of Asia. But also myself, I have quite a lot of research experiences on the East Asia. I mean, the Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia combined together becomes the Grand East Asia, focused on the maritime area. That means we are trying to promote the regional cooperation all around the North and Southeast Asia. That means we will try to enhance our cooperation between China and ASEAN countries in the context or in the long process, processing evolution of regional integration. That means we are trying to work for the futures of build up the East Asian community. So this is our common ground between China and the ASEAN country, in particular with our Filipino friends. So this is just my short introduction of myself. In the previous session of presentation given by Mr. Gao Zhikai, Mr. Gao, and I also share a little bit similar experiences in the United States. Of course, Mr. Gao, he has plenty of times in Yale in the United States, but I also took 1 year in the Columbia University at New York. As you know, this university is also one of the great universities next to Yale University. Right? And so the president of the university, whose name was Eisenhower, as you know, who was the 5-star general in World War II. So in the kind of the time, China and the United States as allies with each other against the invasion of Japan, militant Japan in China and in Philippines. So that means China, United States, and Philippines, we shared common experiences in the wartime of second anti-fascism, Second War anti-fascism. And Eisenhower at the time, later on he used to be a president of Columbia University, and then later on after the World War II, he becomes the president of the United States. I remember in 1953, just right the year when the war ended over the Korean Peninsula. So even at the time, China and the United States, of course, in the war, Second World War, we are allied with each other, but later on, we becomes the enemy with each other over the Korean War, as you know. But President Eisenhower was president to end the war on the Korean Peninsula. So that means war is not good experiences for us between China and Japan, because we suffered quite a lot between China and the Philippines. And the war on Korean Peninsula, we suffered between China and the United States. So this year was the 80th anniversary of the ending the World War II. Of course, this is the great anniversaries of 80 years for the victory of the war against the invasion from Japan for us, China, United States, and the Philippines. So that means, regardless of kind of the war experiences, China, Philippines, United States, we suffered quite a lot in the past, and then we are the members of the ending the war, and right now, I don't think all of us want to once again to wage the war with each other, because we suffered seriously in the past. So I think that in this context of the ending of war, China and the United States and the Philippines, will share common ground for maintaining peace with each other and all around the East Asia. So this is the first point I would say with the background in the Columbia University. And the second point, once again, I also mentioned the Columbia University. As you know, right now, there's the quite famous university in Columbia University, whose name is Jeffrey Sachs. Yeah, which is a big guy, not only in the academic research, but also policy research in the United States. He is a great guy to build this great theory for economic recovery or resilience, after the ending of Cold War, So he make great help for the Russia after the collapse of Soviet Union. So he give big hand for the resilience of Russia. And now he also discuss and makes a critical contribution for the assessment about China. If you Google or you read quite a lot of messages about Professor Jeffrey Sachs, and he made quite a lot of points in his papers, in his presentations online, or even YouTube or X. So he makes very great remarks or point of views that in this world, look around this world, China is on the rise up. There's no any evidence to stop the rise of China. So China becomes their, now we are one of the biggest economy in the world next to United States. And as Mr. Gao mentioned that maybe later on, China will be the first. So it is inevitable for China to develop, to grow up, to become the first economy in the world. But comparing the United States as a hegemonic power, after the end of Cold War, as you know, Americans as a Western power get used to the traditional historical experiences of empire. I'm a historian, actually. So when I study the Western history, there's a very basic logic to find the power build-up. The Western power experiences since the ancient time, they always follows the way of Roman Empire. As you know, the first emperor of the Roman Empire, whose name is Tsar, Emperor Tsar. So he has the logic to define the Roman Empire expansion. He gives it 3 words. I come, I found, I conquer. It is basic logic of Western Empire since the ancient time. So if we study the modern time, in which when the European power expanded, so European power expanded. They, by ways of funding, come and conquer. So our East Asian countries, including China and the Philippines, we were conquered or defeated by the West, right? So we become the part of Western colonial system globally, right? So this still follows the ways of Western imperial logic. Now, extended to the current situation. As you know, American President Donald Trump, of course, he's a very special man, right? Special politician with the business background, right? So, in my personal observation, Donald Trump still follows the way of Western imperial logic. That means funding, coming, and conquer. So what is the process of this kind of imperial logic taken by the American? So you already know, Donald Trump already declared something like, why not Canada? Could it be the 51 states of the United States, right? Or Greenland. Could it be a part of the United States, maybe ahead of, year ahead, right? Or, the neighboring of the United States, like the Mexico Bay, could be renamed with the American Bay, right? Or even Mexico could be follows American economic, scope, controlled by the United States. Or even, Panama Canal, or even the Panama State could be follows American logic, or even some other, Southern or Caribbean states could be follows Americans' way, so-called controlled by or determined by their so-called New Monroe Doctrine. So this is the American, logic, followed by the Western, experiences in 1,000 years. How about China? Of course, our country shares very long time history, more than 5,000, right? But as a historian, when I study the Chinese history, in particular the Chinese relation with our neighbors around Asia, is quite different regarding the basic logic comparing the Western power. I always say that in Western society, this is the unilarity in a society regarding their mindset or their logic. That means the whole of the world could be followed the one logic, with the one value, with the one model. So a country expanded eventually will be the empire over the world. But Chinese history, in Chinese history, we have different logic. I mean, basic logic, or first principle to define our relation between China and our neighbors. There's the duality, not the uniarity. Duality, that means on the one hand, we have the China, but others, we have neighborhood. These the two, entity coexist at the same time in history since the ancient time. So that's the reason why we look around their, history, in ancient history, I mean, China and the Philippines. We were coexisting with each other for more than 1,000 years, right? Even there's a very exact facts that 400 years ago, one of the small state on this island, called the Sulu Kingdom. Sulu Kingdom has a very close relation with mainland China, 400 years ago. Even if the king of Sulu would like to contribute its territory to be merged into mainland China. I read a historical document in Chinese archives. That's original documents to tell the story like it is. But another document written by Chinese emperor, Emperor Qianlong Emperor. So Chinese emperor said that, no, it's not necessary. China is already big enough. So it's not necessary to have one more state, to get inside of China. You just keep your position as a kingdom. So this logic tells us that Chinese experiences to manage our relation with our neighborhood and Western powers experiences to manage their relation with the neighborhood is different. So the basic logic is different between these two kind of powers in history. And now, comparing with Americans, Donald Trump's mindset defines North American or Chinese mindset at the moment is quite different. So as Mr. Gao mentioned that just recent years, Chinese President Xi Jinping has the 4 initiatives. Global development. Development is very important, right? The first session talking about that, right? And global security, so security, culture of security. Our general talking quite a lot about culture of security. We share quite similar, to have their, the value, our East Asian value, our Chinese value, which is different with the West. And the third is global civilization initiative. So we need their, cultural background, or even sharing our common or similar civilization with each other, like East Asia. This is quite diverse regarding their culture, regarding their religion. We are quite diverse. If our Filipino friends go into inside of China, China is quite diverse regarding our culture, regarding our religion. We accommodate the different kind of religions. For example, of course, Confucius culture is our core culture, but we also have quite a lot of population believed in Buddhism. Quite a lot believed in, Muslim, and also quite a lot of Christian inside of China. Even quite a lot of, beliefs in Catholic Church, the Catholic Christian, right?
Yeah, Professor.
Right.
I'm sorry because we have a very limited
Yes.
time. We only
So
have
that's one
until
conclusion,
5:30.
right? So I would say that China is smaller Asia, and Asia is a bigger China. So we share quite a lot of commonality with each other. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Let's now listen with former Ambassador Victor Gao for his reaction.
How long?
For 5-10 minutes would be okay.
Hello. I can't help but immediately respond to Mr. Gao's point regarding artificial intelligence. You say it's not American intelligence, but artificial global intelligence. That's not true. Try out AI and begin to use ChatGPT. I asked it, can you explain to me the arbitration between Philippines and China? It responded, the Permanent Court of Arbitration ruled blah, 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 blah. You know that's not true. It's not the Permanent Court of Arbitration. It was simply an ad hoc panel constituted. Okay, so I stand corrected, it says. 2 weeks later, asks another question. It said, the Permanent Court of Arbitration ruled so and so. So can you check again? And I know this is not true. No? So I stand corrected. It was an arbitral panel constituted under UNCLOS. So I got angry. Are you stupid? I thought you're intelligent, but you seem to be stupid. It was quiet, though. And then I asked, by the way, do you read Chinese? No, I don't. Do you read Hokkien? No, I don't. Do you read Mandarin? No, I don't. It is a matter of fact that at least the language model of AI doesn't read Chinese text. No? It reads Chinese text. If you give it a particular text in Chinese, it will translate. No? But it doesn't read all of the materials that is the basis of its intelligence. No? So what happens here is that more and more people are relying on AI rather than Google, and this is being analyzed according to the American biases. So we're having an entire generation believing the American lies. No? I'll give you another example. I just did it now. Because you mentioned DeepSeek, no? So I asked it. Does DeepSeek read Chinese media reports? I couldn't find any credible evidence that DeepSeek can read Chinese media reports. And then it even says, DeepSeek exhibits censorship or content moderation, which means it's judging now that DeepSeek, the Chinese media outfit, AI, isn't accurate. A more important question, I just ask it now. No? I ask it, who are the countries which mainly won World War II? The main victors are the Allied powers, which doesn't include China. First of all, United States, of course. Second, Soviet Union. Third, United Kingdom. Oh, China is only fourth. That's responsible for the victory in World War II. Other significant allies, France. How could it have won the World War when it was subjugated early in the war? No? My point here is not just to go on this detail, but to point out that information world, alarmingly, is becoming more and more controlled by the US. No? This is so true in our country when I've written a book. No? I've written probably 200 columns of the South China Sea issue. My friends here, Ado and Herman, have written reams of columns on the South China issue. But these are never answered by the DFA nor by the President. In fact, if you go to the DFA website and look for the official stand of the Philippines on the South China Sea dispute, there's none. The only explanation is on Scarborough Shoal, which is different from what the Commodore Tarela or the President himself. No? If you notice, the President has never explained no, our dispute with China. All he does is to give one-line explanations. We will fight for every inch of Philippine territory. Next day he says, we will defend our exclusive economic zone. He doesn't even know the difference between EEZ and territory. So does especially Gilbert Teodoro, who heads our defense establishment, but doesn't know the difference between EEZ and Philippine territory. Can I continue?
Yes, yeah. Please continue. Still have 5 minutes.
Which gives me, brings me to another point. My qualification, my one qualification that wasn't mentioned by Raul is the most important qualification. It is, in this room, among all the scholars, I have studied the South China issue the longest. for 30 years. The reason being, and of course, the South China Sea issue is close to my heart because I could have been the first casualty of a conflict in the South China Sea. This happened in 1995, no? When the Chinese suddenly set up some kind of houses, no, or in Mischief Reef. No? I'll tell you later why they did it. Now, Ramos, the most Machiavellian of our presidents, had a bright idea. No? He said, let's bring journalists, foreign journalists, on a helicopter to fly over Mischief Reef so they can take photos for themselves how the Chinese are intruding into our territory. No? So what happened is that they brought about 24 journalists, me being the youngest. So they put us on a LST. No? Imagine that they put us on a World War II vintage LST, which had 2 Huey Vietnam vintage helicopters. And then they brought each of us groups of journalists over Mischief Reef. No? So we saw the Chinese there not to be in camisetas, short pants, hardly a PLA-looking Chinese. No? And we were so proud, we were so adventurous during that time. We said that we admire your innovation, Mr. President. Later on, I realized what was happening. Ramos, I'm sorry, but wanted to use us as cannon fodder. When, years later, in a golf club, I saw one of the generals who planned it. He was very apologetic. We didn't know you were in that group of journalists. Because scenario 1 was that for that helicopter to go over Mischief Reef and land back safely. The second scenario was that a Chinese who lived there would shoot at us. Because the helicopters were marked press. Who would understand the marking of press? It was a real possibility that we would be shot. And their discussions there is, why not? It would bring this Chinese aggression to light internationally. Now, I'm saying this because this is the same tactic the Coast Guard is doing now. They're still insisting that the Philippines controls Scarborough Shoal, which we don't anymore. Let's face truth. They got to control it 12 years ago because the U.S. fooled them. So hell will freeze over until we get back Scarborough Shoal. No? So what they're doing is that they approach Scarborough Shoal with the Chinese occupying it, hoping that the Chinese would use real bullets. If that ever happens, it will be international incident. And with the U.S. control of media, as I explained, China will again appear to be the bully. That's how, and one more point, although maybe you can give me some more time later on. Mr. Gao mentioned that for 1,000 years, no? Or 2,000 years, or 1,000 years, what we call the Philippines and China were good friends. No? So what happened is that we became hostile to China only in the last 9 years. And guess what was that 9 years? No? 6 years of Aquino, who was so beholden to, whose mother, bless her soul, was so beholden to the U.S. Why? Because without the U.S., there wouldn't have been a people power thing. Without the U.S., the rebels would have captured the palace in 1989. If you remember the incident in 1989, during the coup, the Americans sent fighter planes to frighten off the rebel planes. No? So you have 6 years of a pro-American president, and then now 3 years of another pro-American president. So the U.S. has held our presidency by the balls, sorry to say. And all we can do is just follow. Now ask me why I think the U.S. has this president holding his balls. Because in 2011, 2011 I think, no? There's a U.S. court ordering the Marcos family to pay human rights victims $2 billion. This wasn't implemented. All they managed to pay was around 200 million. Yeah, less than that. So technically, the Marcos estate, which includes this president, her mother, and everyone in the Marcos family, are in contempt. What does that mean? No? They can be arrested anytime. All their assets could be confiscated. No? And this is one of the reasons why this president can't release his statement of assets and liabilities. As soon as he releases it and it's a document, some sheriff could garnish it. No? I'm simplifying it now because there were a lot of legal moves that the past governments had done. No? Like they claim it cannot be claimed by human rights lawyers, no? But only the Philippine government can claim it. Now what happened? The Hawaii court has an expiry date of 2011 of 10 years. It was extended for another 10 years, and the final extension would end in 2031, which means if that's not settled or if Marcos Jr. doesn't follow the U.S. will, they can do a lot of tricks to claim it before 2031. I hope I've said enough, or
Thank
I
you.
hope there's no walkout. I have to emphasize that I'm a journalist. No? I can only speak about facts on the ground. No? Fascinating are the geopolitics of all this. No? But the reality is that there is peace in ASEAN with all of ASEAN countries willing to talk to China, right? No? There's no other ASEAN country that's fighting China. Only the Philippines is. And the difficulty there is that if there's some trouble in the South China Sea, the Americans would be forced to intervene. And there goes all of our views for peace.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Tiglao. Now we listen to our last reactor, Director Ding Do of the Research Center for International and Regional Issues. He is from Hainan province.
Yes, that's right.
And Hainan is quite close to us. That's the closest island in Philippines. And it's also the venue for the yearly BOA Forum,
Yeah, that's right.
where our late President Fidel Ramos was the founding chairman of the BOA Forum, and our former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo is still an active director of the BOA Forum.
Yeah,
So
that's
let's hear from Director Ding.
Thank you, Chair. And first, I would like to express my thanks to the organizers for having me here to share my opinions. And since I'm the youngest man here, obviously, I would like to express my respects and thanks for all the senior speakers and the moderators for the contributions to the friendship between Chinese and the Philippines peoples. And if you allow me, I would like to start with my discussion by a true story of mine.
Please, yeah.
So, Mr. Peter knows me and my wife. My wife, she is working in the same institute with me, National Institute for South China Sea Studies. So sometimes we talk about the South China Sea issue at home. So one day, my son, 6 years old, he told me, "Father, Dad, I won't travel to the Philippines. I asked him why. He said, I know there is some conflicts in the South China Sea, at seas. So at that moment, I realized, I talked to my wife, we should not talk about the South China Sea issue, talk about our work at home in front of my son. Why? Because I don't want the South China Sea issue define the next generation's impression to our neighborhood. That means the South China Sea issue should also, there are a lot of examples and reasons. Number one, there is no new occupation to the islands and the reefs for the past 20 years. Number two, there is no armed conflict, there is no war. And number three, the commercial navigation safety and the freedom has not been interrupted by the dispute or by the incident. And another example is the COC consultation negotiation has been conducting smoothly, and there is some hope for all the parties to get an agreement next year, right? So, and the China and ASEAN countries have make a groove important achievement under the DOC framework as to regarding to the low sensitive maritime functional cooperation, such as maritime environmental protection, search and rescue, and other things. So such positive factors, I think, is the mainstream of the South China Sea issue. And the reason is that all the members, all the coastal states, including China, they are make a great effort on this. So it gave me 3 points I think should share with all the audience. The first one is that the regional states in around the South China Sea, they have the same, they have the common wish, consensus to keep the South China Sea as a stability and peaceful place. And the second is that the dual track 2 approach, that means the disputes should be handled and resolved by the directly involved parties by negotiation and consultation, and the stability and the peace of the South China Sea should be maintained by China and ASEAN members. This approach is still useful, cannot be given up. And the third thing is that we should have the confidence, we should have see the mainstream of the South China Sea issue to believe China and the dispute parties could find some proper ways to handle the dispute, and we should have the confidence that China and the ASEAN countries can maintain the peace and stability under the COC framework. So that is the positive issue. So if I have some time, I will talk about the risk and the challenges. But that depends on our chair and the next round of discussion. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we are going to entertain 5 questions from the audience. But first, I'm going to have the first crack of question. That's the privilege of the moderator. Sorry. Well, in the discussions that we have, we heard of Professor Gao, General Esperon, and the other panelists here. Now, in recent weeks, there's been a marked escalation of tension in the disputed waters in South China Sea, which has been described as, open quote, a simmering cauldron of territorial and maritime disputes, unquote. There's the spectacle also of Philippine military drills with the United States and their allies, which followed recent close encounters between vessels of the Chinese Coast Guard and their maritime militia and the Philippine Coast Guard. Now, amid the disturbing headlines, it has been argued that the best chance for keeping the peace now rests on a pragmatic solution that binds all parties to the adherence to international law and the promotion of respect between the claimants. My first question is directed to General Esperon, sir. How, for instance, do we even begin to imagine the basic architecture for an enduring peace in a climate of heightened tension and suspicion? And how can the concepts of dialogue and cooperation, which have seemingly fallen into disfavor amid mutual distrust, be reintroduced in the current question or the situation? That is my question to you, sir. And my second question is directed to Professor Gao. And how could the notion of a shared prosperity for all neighbors, a notion China has nurtured since the last decade, be made to fit into this design of peace? General Esperon first.
Thank you.
How can the concepts of dialogue and cooperation, which have seemingly fallen into disfavor amid mutual distrust, be reintroduced in the current situation?
Whether we like it or not, we will have to revert to the number one instrument of national power, that is diplomacy. We cannot engage each other militarily. As I said, I even said that if we are internally weak, then we may not engage even in diplomacy. But then again, you will have to revert to diplomacy by all means, because it will be the first tool that you can have even if you are weak. What I'm saying is, while we recognize the South China Sea as a probable flashpoint, and it could be the source of misunderstanding between the Philippines and China, we must understand that the West Philippine Sea is not the sum total of our relations with China. In other words, there are other things that we should consider, including trade, which is very important, cultural, people to people, including tourism. There are other things that we must consider. And therefore, the position of the Philippines under President Duterte was always friend to all, enemy to no one. In other words, friendships and enemies are not absolute. In fact, the preference would be friendship. But then again, it is in the national interest that you should also protect your sovereignty and territorial integrity and your sovereign rights. In this case, sovereign rights given by UNCLOS provisions. Territory as defined by whether it's Treaty of Paris or the Murillo map. And of course, your sovereignty. That is why you have to put up your defense forces, your military. But you must calibrate this, because if you don't have the means, then military as an instrument should not be the first priority. It must revert back to diplomacy. And it is happening now. It is happening now. In fact, despite all the challenges in the West Philippine Sea, we are still continuing the dialogue for the Code of Conduct. And hopefully, despite the years that it had been there, I think it's since 2012, we still hope that there will be a final Code of Conduct that is enforceable. so that that can become the basis for mutual understanding on what should be done in the West Philippine Sea. But personally, let me say this. Even if we spend 100 years or 1,000 years, we cannot solve the differences in the South China Sea if we insist on territorial claims. Just imagine this. We have 17 islands of Vietnam right inside our EEZ. And they are building or strengthening their positions there. There are 5 People's Republic of China positions there and 2 others outside our EEZ, but it used to be part of what we call the Kalayaan Island Group, which is a municipality of Palawan. Malaysia has 5 islands there in our EEZ. And before I forget, Taiwan still occupies what used to be the originally biggest island there, Taiping, or I forgot the Chinese name for that. Taiping. And Brunei has 1. So what do you mean? When people shout, that's our territory, that's our place, that's ours. Are you telling me that we should tell Vietnam to vacate? We remember it went to war with China. But they are friends now, or maybe even earlier. You mean to tell me we'll tell Malaysia to get out from their 5 islands because we are claiming? Or do you want to tell me also that we all get out of there because that's China territory? I don't think we could solve it by claiming territories there, but we can have agreements that could benefit us all. For example, what do you think about having a marine biology research, international research site in Pag-asa Island? Everybody is welcome. What do you think if we start talking about fisheries agreement so that China will not declare off-season here in places that we claim? So maybe we can concentrate on what is doable. Because I believe claiming the territory for ourselves or part thereof would not settle the matter. We all believe in the importance of the South China Sea. It is where world trade of about 3 trillion or about 1/3 of world trade passes there or more. So let it be a body of water that should give benefits to one and all. Well, as Mr. Gao has said, I do not know if you are claiming that the United States wants war, but China doesn't want war. Well, I am happy that at least China and the United States are talking. Even if they are talking for now only about tariff rates. But I know that you are talking to each other. Trade is so important between the two. That only demonstrates that we should also be talking trade with the United States and China. Personally, how could I hate United States? I have relatives there. How could I hate China? I love your cuisine. I love going to places in China. So I think there is so much to say about peace between us rather than talking about our territories. Maybe the wisdom of the Filipinos and Chinese in 100 years will solve the problem of territorial disputes. But for now, let's talk about other matters. Continue talking. Maybe we could settle a lot of things. As we are doing here right now, this is a very good start. The Association for Philippine-China Understanding is a very good organization. I wish I were a member.
Thank you. You are most welcome, sir, to become member of APCU.
Good luck to you, and thank you again for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, General Esperon, for emphasizing the importance of independent foreign policy, which is enshrined in our Constitution. Thank you also for emphasizing the importance of dialogue, consultation, consensus, which are enshrined in the joint communique that was signed by the Philippines and China when the diplomatic relations were established in 1975 in order to resolve possible disputes between the two countries. Despite the pronouncements now of some high-ranking officials of the Philippine government that they are tired of listening to all these claims or whatever dialogues coming from the People's Republic of China. And I do believe, as many Filipinos believe, that diplomacy would still be the #1 factor in resolving whatever disputes we may have with China or any other claimant countries in the South China Sea. And now let's go to Professor Gao, and then may I reiterate the earlier question that I asked. How could the notion of a shared prosperity for all neighbors, a notion China has nurtured since the last decade, be made to fit into this design for peace, so like Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, Global Civilization Initiative?
Thank you very much. I listened very carefully to all the panelists and the general. I agree with many of the remarks they made. Now, when I look at the South China Sea, the worst that can happen is that it becomes a sea of war and conflict, and it becomes such a burden on the future generations of all our people, the Chinese people, the Filipino people, etc. Now, that is something that we want to avoid. Now, the best case scenario is actually not that difficult. You may know I used to be the general counsel of China National Offshore Oil Company, which is the offshore oil developer in China. It is responsible for all the offshore area in China, including in the South China Sea. Now, you may remember when China opened up the offshore area for exploitation in the 1980s. At that time, China didn't have the money to explore for oil or gas. China didn't have the technology, and China didn't have the equipment. Now China has all of this, is that right? So at that time, there is one very simple concept. It's called a PSA, Production Sharing Agreement, which is a standard agreement in the oil and gas exploration and production area. Meaning, if I'm the landlord, if I have the entitlement, but I don't have the money or have the technology, I can create a cooperation with foreign producer on a 50-50 basis. It's 50-50. And if the foreign developer comes in with all the money and it starts to drill oil for, well for oil or gas and discovers nothing, that developer will be responsible for all the losses. Basically, it walks away with all the losses. If it's lucky and discovers all the oil and gas reserves, then everything that is being produced will need to pay off the cost up front first. So it pays off all the cost. And then until the developer recovers all the cost, then it goes to 50-50 distribution. You can walk away with the 50% of the profit or the revenue, or you can walk away with the 50% production of oil or gas. Now, I think when I look at the disputed areas between China and the Philippines, or between China and Vietnam, and to a much lesser extent between China and Malaysia, and almost to zero between China and Indonesia, for example, actually the best way to solve the problem is that while each of us will continue to have our territorial position, and it may or may not be difficult to solve them tomorrow or in the coming year, we can actually start focusing on producing the oil and gas reserves on a cooperation basis. It's very similar to production sharing basis. In that case, for example, Philippines will immediately get the benefit of the produced oil and gas reserve. It will really contribute to making up for whatever energy shortage Philippines has. And I understand Philippines does not have enough imported oil or gas for generation of power. You may actually have shortage of power in the country. And this is actually one of the reasons why manufacturing is not growing that fast in the Philippines. And when we are talking about the AI revolution, you will need tremendous amount of power if you really want to be a player in AI revolution. So I think the Philippines cannot wait for power to be generated. You need to act right now. So one way to do it is to, for example, to fight for the disputed territories, for example. Or the other way is that we can cooperate on peaceful basis, and we can share the production of the oil and the gas reserves for our mutual benefit. Now, you may say this is easy said than done, but I think we will need to be creative. We need to really engage with each other for common prosperity. Now, allow me to add very briefly. If you look at the South China Sea, do you know what really stands out? Coral reefs. South China Sea has the largest collection of coral reefs compared with any other body of water in the world. So these coral reefs need to be protected through international cooperation. The coral reefs don't recognize Filipino or Chinese or Vietnamese boundary. They actually exist, in their own capacity. Now, the other way is very obvious. Navigation, for example, disaster relief or disaster measures, satellite images, for example, and all the other things, weather monitoring, etc. I think for all these other things which are not disputed, we can really work together. And different member states in this region can really pitch in with your money or with your technological know-how, etc., and making sure that the South China Sea will really be an area of peace and cooperation, rather than what we keep talking about, war and war and war. That's not the best solution for our generation or for the future generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gao. May I ask Ambassador Tiglao to make a quick reaction to the opinions
Just
of
on
our
that,
two keynote speakers?
Mr. Gao, that ship about shared production has sailed already. You don't remember that in 2012, Felix Exploration, owned by the MVP group, but really owned by Salim, the Indonesian, was into such talks with CNOOC. But what did Felix do? It suddenly sent its own exploratory survey ship into the Reed Bank. In fact, that's what started the 2012 problems. And after that, I hope you talk to the CNOOC people again. They were criticized by the Communist Party. You were fooled by. You were fooled. Never enter such agreement again. And now we have so-called Filipino nationalists claiming that we can never give up our sovereignty through joint exploration. Maybe it would be, as I said, another president with enough political will to do that. Kasi my point is that, last point, Raul, no?
Yes. Please go ahead.
Forums like this always move into generalities, modest statements, no? But let's just watch what Vietnam is doing, no? While Vietnam keeps insisting on their rights, they're quiet. But then they've been building more artificial islands now, no? In our case, we spent 30 billion for the Senate building, but we cannot spend that much to renovate the airport at Pag-asa. I mean, that's the problem really with this. It's the problem is with our elites. No?
30 billion for that Senate building that is not yet usable, and $1 trillion plus for the uncontrolled flood control projects. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Well, from the statements of General Esperon and Professor Gao, and I'm very proud of listening about your concept of production sharing agreement and about the proposal of General Esperon about possible venture arrangement of how we can cooperate with the other claimant states. We lawyers who are here understand the concept of condominium law. And I see some developers here of condominium units, and they know pretty well the meaning of the concept of condominium. I think this is one area possibly that we can also explore. I think the Department of Foreign Affairs or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China can start considering the expanded notion of condominium, and perhaps this could help resolve the conflict or dispute between the Philippines and China, which General Esperon said we cannot resolve that in 100 years or even 1,000 years. But if we can adopt the condominium concept of our relationship, we can possibly enjoy the fruits of the disputed waters in the South China Sea. So, anyone who would like to ask a question?
I have the privilege
Yes.
of holding on to the mic.
Yes,
Yes.
Mr.
Good evening.
Herman
Q.
Laurel.
Laurel.
You can direct the
Yes.
question to anyone. So please identify yourself and direct your question to any one of our panelists here.
Yes, I'm from the Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute. And of course, I've been debating this and discussing this, and we've been writing about this South China Sea dispute between China and the Philippines for the past 15 years, as Bobby Tiglao has mentioned earlier. But I think the bottom line is very simple. If the Americans were not allowed to reassert its dominance in Philippine politics, we would not have a problem. Because the suggestions for joint development and so on has been there, signed between President Duterte and President Xi Jinping since 2017. Unfortunately, we got interrupted by the new administration in 2022, 2023, and we have this mess. But the mess is now visiting his own office in Malacanang today. But I wanted to bring this up to particularly Victor Gao, because this offers a bit of a ray of light, a bit of hope. As the Politico American magazine reported, and it is reported in Newsweek and many other American magazines, after the Tianjin summit and the September 3 victory parade of China, U.S. Defense Secretary Hegseth announced to the American audience, and it is in this headline of Politico, Pentagon plan prioritizes homeland over China threat. Given your exposure almost every day, I can see you on YouTube and discussions, Mr. Victor Gao. What is your sense? What is the chances of this becoming a real strategic direction of the United States? How withdrawing from the China threat and from Asia, concentrating on its homeland. Unfortunately, on the ground here in the Philippines, we see I assume to be the deep state, not conforming to the Trump administration's pronouncement of withdrawing from the political conflict with China. And we are seeing the biggest arms depot in Asia being built up in Subic, and so on and so forth, the Asian NATO being propagandized, at least, if not in reality, actually being done. What is your sense?
Thank you very much. Allow me to be very quick.
Please.
I know other panelists want to contribute their views. First of all, I was doing live commentary when the victory parade was happening in Beijing. I was doing that in the CCTV headquarters. And my impression, allow me to share this with you, that the victory parade on September the 3rd will be judged by history as a major turning point, because what China demonstrated will convince everyone who cares to watch this in the world that China now enjoys military superiority above the United States. Now, the Americans may not agree with me, but when you look at the conventional weapons as well as nuclear weapons, China is not next to the United States. China is actually ahead of the United States. This is very profound, and it will take time to sink in. But that leads to a very important next question. That is, whether the United States wants to pick up a war against China. Let me tell you, as I mentioned, inevitability of peace between China and the United States. Does that mean the United States will not kind of challenge China? No, they will continue to challenge China. Do you know through what means? Through using proxies. They want to turn the Philippines into a proxy. They want to push the Philippines to the forefront, to instigate a war between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea, and the United States hides in the background, and it does not suffer any casualty. The casualties will be either the Chinese on the Chinese side or the Filipinos on the Filipino side. That would be very, very dangerous. There is another potential proxy. That is the separatists in Taiwan. The Americans want to push the separatists in Taiwan to the forefront to instigate a war between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. Now, other than that, I don't think any general or admiral in Washington will really go in that direction of instigating a direct war with China. Because, let me share with you, after the Korean War, it is a consensus in Washington that the United States does not want to fight a ground war with China anymore. They are sickened by the casualties suffered by the Americans on the Korean Peninsula, because they learned the lesson in the Vietnam War, and Philippines was very much involved in the Vietnam War because the Americans used the Philippines as the naval base, as the air base, etc. China said, don't cross parallel 17. Let me tell you, the Americans never crossed above the parallel 17. China drew a line, and the Americans didn't move 1 inch above parallel 17. That was in the 1960s. That was in the 1970s. Now, allow me to share with you. If you watch the aerial battle between the Pakistanis and the Indians, and I know both of them very well, they both talked about Victor Gao as being very influential when I talked with them on Indian TV and on Pakistani TV. Listen, the Indians suffered losses. President Trump said 6 of your planes were shut down, or even 7. And Pakistani didn't suffer any loss. Do you know why? Because Pakistanis now are very advanced vis-a-vis the Indians, because they use all the military equipment either exported by China to Pakistan or jointly produced between China and Pakistan, to such an extent that India is very much disadvantaged. Why? Because the Pakistanis have learned from the Chinese cooperation that they need to integrate what I say, the space, the sky, that is the Air Force, the ground, that is the Army, and the surface water, that is the Navy, and the submarine, 5 dimensions integrated into one seamless fighting dimension, aided and enabled by information technology and AI. So the Pakistanis now can see further than the Indians, and their missile can shoot further than the Indians. The Indians could not see the incoming planes on the Pakistani side. And they could not see any missile coming because they were not as instantaneously integrated. When you watch the parade in Tiananmen Square on September the 3rd, you saw the troops, the soldiers, the generals, and the military trucks, the missiles, etc., one by one. But in real battle, they do not perform in each capacity. They are merged into a fighting machine. Allow me to share with you my true observation. China has the best technology now in the world to integrate all these dimensions together into one seamless fighting chain of command. Now, the Americans actually panic because they keep saying they can no longer build naval ships. Their production of shipbuilding is only 1% of China. And they do not have enough rare earth. You know, now many countries talk about their rare earth. Myanmar talks about Pakistan talks about they have rare earth. Iran talks about they have rare earth. Turkey says, I have rare earth. But if you really know the truth, to have the rare earth does not solve the problem. You need to extract the rare earth elements from the other minerals, which they actually coexist, and then refine them. Now, if China does not discontinue choking the Americans in the neck, the Americans are running out of rare earth reserves. They will no longer be able to produce their missiles or the phantom planes, etc., the killing machine that they need to, be involved in any war in the world. So I think we are at a crossroad already, and we already gone beyond the point of no return. That is, the United States has come to the conclusion that it is futile to fight. I admire India very much, but I don't think they want to really find themselves in another war, especially aerial war between India and Pakistan, because they now realize they are very much disadvantaged for lack of technology and lack of this integrated command system. That is the reality. I think I'm a realist. I'm a very pragmatic person. And I'm here very honored, and I feel myself very much privileged. And I want to share my truth with you, whatever I really understand. And I do not come to Philippines alone. I travel throughout the world, really. And I want to say, between China and the Philippines, really, being friends will be the better approach. Let's talk about peace. None of us should wear war on our lips. If you listen to China, China never talks about war. China always talks about peace. And I think it is peace that will be the most important thing. China has tried its best to convince the Americans, talk about peace with me. Don't talk about war with me. Because if you talk about war with me, you will be beaten. You will lose the next war as you lost the war in the Korean War. And that will be probably, the Americans probably will find that very much unacceptable. But let's really embrace peace. That's my fundamental point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Gao. I'm reminded of, Secretary Lorenzano when he was Defense Secretary, and Secretary Esperon when he was the National Security Advisor, and be Presidential Advisor for Northern Luzon. And we all come from the region. We speak the lingua franca of the North, which is Ilocano. And we were discussing about how we can help modernize the armed forces of the Philippines, which Secretary Esperon in his presentation made the necessity, indispensability of having really a strong military force. And we were hoping that the Philippines would soon develop its own weapons and armaments by not just relying on importing weapons from other countries, from the US, and now from India, from Korea, and from Indonesia. And the three of us were thinking of putting up a place which we are going to call the Special Economic Zone for the Development of Weapons and Armaments in the Philippines. And I was starting to review the foreign incentive law, or the Investment Act, and we are trying to remove all those red lines there. And unfortunately, instead of the Philippines developing its own missile system, we opted to buy Indian-made missiles. It's called BrahMos. And sadly, recently when the president visited India, I don't know what was committed again to be bought by the Philippines from India. Well, anyway, thank you for that question, Mr. Herman Chu Laurel, one of our trustees. Any question from the audience? Anyone? Orion Perez? Yeah. Please give the microphone to Mr. Perez.
Hi，大家好，对我们的中国朋友，我就告诉你们欢迎光临。Anyway, so what I'm about to say is not really a question.
Kindly introduce yourself.
Oh yeah, my name is Orion
your
Perez.
Association, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Orion Perez Dum Dum, and I am a constitutional reform advocate, just like my friend Raul Lambino and my other friend here, Dindo Donato. I wanted to make a comment first before I ask my question. And the first comment I wanted to make was about a Facebook post that a Facebook friend of mine made. He's retired General Romeo Poquis. And he actually commented about how other countries in ASEAN, particularly Malaysia and Vietnam, actually have their own conflicts with China as well. And yet, they were able to set aside whatever conflicts they have and still be able to be friendly with China on areas of trade. And in that sense, they were able to join in, for example, as I think observer status in BRICS and things like that, which would actually really enhance their economy. And quite unfortunately, in our case in the Philippines, we haven't really been able to do that. We're so one-sided and all that. And because of a lot of whatever conflicts occur, we don't have the finesse of looking at a modus vivendi. It's always kicking and screaming and making a lot of noise and not really trying to engage. And I responded to my friend, General Poquis, thinking, perhaps one of our problems in the Philippines is we are the only country in ASEAN that does not share any land border with any other country at all. We are the only totally isolated archipelago. Everyone else, Malaysia, they share borders with Thailand, they share borders on the island of Borneo. Indonesia, they share so many borders with so many other countries, etc., etc. But we in the Philippines, we have none of that. And as a result, we've never had a solid history of having to maintain friendly relations, or at least a modus vivendi with a next-door neighbor who you may disagree with, but you will still have to live with because of the border that you have. So I don't know, that might be partly it. This is not to disparage our friends at the DFA, because this is just the reality of our history. We approach things with more finesse, so that yes, we may have our so-called territorial disputes or disagreements on certain things, but still be able to forge a positive relationship regarding economic development, trade, so that we can also partake in developments around the world and in the region. Thank you very much.
Yeah, please, to start.
All right. I would like to give some answers to your question. I pitch your great question to me, to us, right? Actually, as Chinese foreign policy researchers, I'm much more focused on our neighborhood, and in particular around the South China Sea. So in the past 1 year, I traveled around the South China Sea. So Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, of course now in Philippines. So when I was in the trip to these areas around South China Sea, so that made me a very deep impression. When I was in that countries, like in Indonesia, I take the high-speed train from Jakarta to Bandung. So all discuss about their, some kind of the business cooperation with China. It's a hot topic for the issues between China and Indonesia. And when I was in Malaysia, so I was invited to visit the Xinshan city next door to Singapore. So they discussed quite a lot how to build the new model in Malaysia with sharing some experiences of Chinese model, so-called Shenzhen Economic Special Zone. Right? So they want to learn or even to try to draw the investment from China to build next to Shenzhen in Malaysia, follows the Chinese way. And when I was in Vietnam, actually just 2 months ago, so in Hoi An, in Da Nang, in Ho Chi Minh City, so Chinese Vietnamese politicians or even the local governmental officers talk to me regarding how to build their local, economic resilience. Just this year, there's a big, not only the economic, but also the local political or administrative reforms inside of Vietnam, right? So our Vietnamese say that, well, we should think something more beyond their traditional pattern of so-called open up and reform inland of Vietnam. But they say that, well, we should learn something from Chinese model, so-called governance, Chinese governance, because in the past, Vietnamese all try to set their special model, which is different with Chinese, all right? Not only focus on the economy, but also focus on their political diversity, right? But now Vietnamese are aware that we should have some kind of concentrate on not only their political reform, but more important than economic. Without economic development, there will be no solid foundation for their national resilience. So I think that even I arrived here last night. I talked some of our Chinese diplomats this morning. So and even I was interviewed by the Chinese Vietnamese, the Filipinos journalists. So they also say to me that now Philippines, even though the hotspot is South China Sea, right? Security relation is always on the headlines for the discussion or even on the newspaper, but regarding their society, inside of society of Philippines, or even their the business circle, they concern much more on the economic or trade relation, or even the investment from China or from other ASEAN members. So that means maybe essentially for any nations in this region of East Asia or in Southeast Asia, so economic development is critical concern by ordinary people, by the society. Without economic development, maybe there'll be some kind of uncertainty or even the instabilized phenomenon in a society. So that makes some trouble in a society, right? So the reason why somehow like in South Asia or even somehow in some country in Southeast Asia, maybe we know that now even inside of Philippine society, there's some kind of uncertainty, right? So I think if we, or even China, we're aware that we should much focus on our economic development. Otherwise, inside of Chinese society, we have some kind of problem, right? So I think that's the critical choice for their government, for the sector of society, or even for the business. The economic development is a critical choice. So I think that the Chinese experiences, like Mr. Gao talking about the Deng Xiaoping in the past 40 years. So China must focus on the economy, and then we have the foundation for our national security, safeguard. I think that's in this experiences for China and for our Filipino friends, maybe try to enhance our economic cooperation or try to share our exchange at the societal level. So my university, I have two universities. One is my home university, China Forum University, and now I already have the second choice, second job, that is the Hermes University of China, which is the leading university in Beijing. So our university would like to open the door to the scholar or even policy researcher for exchange view with each other, to try and even to share their national governance, their regional governance, of course, the global governance, initiative by the Chinese leader just a few weeks ago, by our Chinese President Xi Jinping, right? So I think that's the key word here is the governance, national governance, regional governance. Of course, the governance around the South China Sea is critical for us.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
my
you.
point.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Ambassador Tiglao, you want to respond?
Yes, just one point. No? That analysis is so wrong. No? Ramos had the capacity to deal with both China and U.S. Gloria Macapagal did so too. Who else? Estrada even did that too. No? Duterte did that too. No? He balanced China. And so I think that analysis is wrong. The big difference is that when you have presidents who are so much American puppets, that's when things go wrong. And look around the world. Britain doesn't share any landmass with any other country. New Zealand, Australia, Japan, but they don't have the gentleman's, I think, convoluted analysis.
So thank you. Any other question? If there's none,
Chair.
can I have this lady here? Yeah, please introduce yourself, ma'am. Yeah.
I think I need to respond somehow. My name is Princess Tomastayaw. I'm the Director for North Asia Division of the Office of Asian and Pacific Affairs of the Department of Foreign Affairs. I just assumed this month. Okay, just to point out, the Philippines will always pursue its own interests based on its own priorities and sovereignty and national interest. That is the primary rule. We will always follow that. Regardless of who we deal with, our own national interests would always prevail. Nonetheless, taking off from the point of the former National Security Advisor, we will always pursue areas where our interests align. So that is, of course, what the gentleman over there mentioned. That is on trade. Maybe unbeknownst to all, despite all the issues that you now see on the television, all these differences that we have on so many security issues, we cooperate with China, and our bilateral relations is very strong. Okay, it encompasses the security issues. Okay, we have trade relations, we have security ties, we have the cultural relations, which is very strong. The ties between our countries, between our two peoples remain, regardless of the issues that face between the two countries. Filipino-Chinese relations, people-to-people relations, cultural relations, these are the basis of also Philippine-China relations. So I just want to point that out. Okay, we will always pursue our national interest based on our priorities. We will always engage with China as an equal partner. We will engage with the US. We will engage with each and every ASEAN member countries, including our neighbors. Well, they're not neighbors, but countries in Europe. We are equal partners, and we will always be guided by the principle that our independent foreign policy based on our own national interests. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that comment, ma'am, from the Department of Foreign Affairs. Well, actually, yes. We have to continue our strong cultural exchanges, people-to-people exchanges, and even tourism. And that is actually the primary mission of APCU. We have been doing that for more than 50 years, since our organization was founded and registered legally. And the sad part, however, is that very recently we observed that there are more Filipinos going to China now as tourists, spending money there in China, than Chinese tourists coming into the Philippines. I was in the Sichuan and Chongqing just 2 days ago. I arrived in the Philippines. When I traveled from Manila to Chengdu, straight flight from through Air China, there were more Filipinos in the plane going to Chengdu. And when I came back yesterday morning, again, there were more Filipinos coming home from China. And then I asked them, what made you travel to China? Well, we enjoy going to China because it's cheap, the hotels are cheap, the food are delicious, they are very cheap, a lot of sceneries that you can see. That was a different situation 5 years ago. 5 years ago. There were a lot of flights from Chengdu to Manila, Guangzhou to Manila, Xiamen to Manila, Quezon to Manila, Beijing to Manila, full of Chinese tourists who would like to come to the Philippines. Why the sudden shift of thought from China? I really don't know the reason why. What's the reason? They are afraid. According to the Chinese, yeah, Mr. Samuel, can you respond to that, sir? He's the president of China Business Association, Philippine-China Business, from Isabela.
They're issuing less visas now at our Manila embassy.
I really don't know
It was the
about
ambassador who told me that, no?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that may be one reason. But I think they really are not applying anymore for Chinese, for Filipino visas to come to the Philippines as tourists. Maybe the Chinese, Philippine-Chinese Business Association can respond to that.
I have another question. I'm Samuel Uy from the Chinese Filipino Business Club, Inc. Actually, my observation of what's going around in the country, because we are looking at the South China Sea, but we have to bring ourselves back to the country. My observation is every day we read the newspaper, we listen to the commentators on the radio, they are majority, I would say, they are anti-Chinese. And I'm saddened because I couldn't erase my eyes. It's stinky. Everywhere I go, I don't want to experience that racism. I did experience it already. And what's going on here? Now, it's not only me. Even our business is affected. Just an example. A week ago, our supplier, 3 of them came over from China. One is good with English, but the other 2, technicians, trainers, they didn't know how to speak English. So one was allowed to come in, but the other 2 were detained. After 2 days, because it's a weekend, so I was trying to ask for some help from friends. The 2 were so scared that they decided to buy ticket and went back home to China. I said, these things are young adults. Somehow now, even the Filipinos, they are affected with what is being planted. These seeds, when we allow them to be planted, a month, a year later, Filipino peoples, they will feel so bullied. That sense of fear is growing already in them. Instead of our natural values, the natural values of Filipinos who are loving, kind, friendly, something is changing. What can we do to reverse this kind of wrong seeds that were planted in the young minds and into the minds of our Filipinos?
Is there one of the panel want to respond? Ambassador?
Let me finish on one point,
Yeah.
because you might want to investigate this. 3 months ago, I was told that our embassy in Beijing was issuing 1/3 of visas than before, no? When I talked to the ambassador, a good friend of mine, former journalist, he was blaming some technical thing. Your observance is very relative. They have more Filipinos going to China because our embassy in Manila, in Beijing, isn't issuing enough visas. You might want to investigate that.
Yeah.
Professor Gao.
If I may add a point, if you look at ASEAN, now Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore already offer visa exemption to Chinese nationals. So anyone in China, just buy a ticket and fly to Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore, and they do not need a visa. That's number one. Coming to the Philippines is still a little bit inconvenient. But allow me to make one point. For the Filipino people, when you look at China, let me tell you, how do you look at China? First of all, China now has money. You know, back 40 years ago, China didn't have money. Any Filipino going to Beijing, banging dollar on the table, you'll be treated as a king at that time. Really? Because we thought about Filipinos, especially Chinese Filipinos, have money at that time. But now China does have a lot of money. China can make huge investments. Look at the BRI. China made investments in all the countries in the world. Why shouldn't China make investment here in the Philippines? So look at China and say, I want to get Chinese investment, number one. Then, when you want to build up connectivity, highways, railways, etc., China can do that faster, with better quality, and with lower budget. That's number two. Number three is that if you have anything to sell, mango, for example, durian, or whatever, seafood, whatever you produce in Philippines, sell to China. China has the largest market, larger than that of the United States, and much closer than the US market. So, from whatever angle, look at China and try to get some benefit of engaging with China. You know, China does not want to say, I want to get all the benefits from the Filipinos. Next month, I will be in Shanghai attending the China International Import Exposition. Import. China is the only country in the world which hosts a big exposition for all the imports from different countries. I want to see Filipino friends go to Shanghai, showcase whatever you can sell to the China market, make a lot of money out of the China market. Now, the other thing is that if the Philippines really wants to build up connectivity of any kind, of all kinds, work with China. And I want to end my remarks by saying the real choice for Philippines is not choosing between China or the United States. The real choice is to make up your mind as to whether the United States is doing the right thing or the wrong thing, and whether China is doing the right thing or the wrong thing. If the United States is doing the right thing, why don't you want to work with the United States? But if the United States is doing the wrong thing, why do you want to work with the United States? Likewise for China, if China is doing the right thing, why don't you want to work with China and benefit from working with China? And if China is doing the wrong thing, of course, you will know what to deal with China if China does the wrong thing. So that is the real choice. Don't be forced into a dilemma of picking and choosing between China and the United States, because China and the United States are now the two largest economies in the world. You want to have benefits from both China and the United States, rather than having one but by excluding the other side. That will be a much better policy for the Filipino brothers and sisters. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gao. I agree with the observation made. Just like Secretary Esperon, he loves the United States. I do love the United States too. My children were all schooled and educated in the United States as well. So, last
Mr.
question before we conclude.
Moderator, nonetheless, let me just say this. It is, I will start from the definition of national security. National security is a state or condition where the general welfare and the well-being of the people, the government institutions, the territory, sovereignty and territorial integrity, and the culture of the Philippines are all protected and enhanced. Anything that will not protect or endanger all these aspirations will elicit a response from the Republic. For example, if the problem is on territory, then therefore the response would be about building your own forces to defend that territory. What I am saying is, it is the right of any country to take action where its national interest is on the line. I think that's no different from China. It has its right to build up its forces. It has its right to its own kind of diplomacy, just like any other country. The United States has its own kind of diplomacy, has its own kind of military, all because they have their national interest to protect or enhance. Therefore, if there is a conflict of interest, then you will always expect some disagreements, if not aggression, or some unfriendly actions. Despite all that reality, we must come to realize that no country will be the victor or the winner if it believes that it should live in violence, in the use of violence, or in the conduct of war. What should come primarily the first, as I presented in our instruments of national policy, of national power, is diplomacy. Diplomacy. Number 8 there was development. But I have my thoughts that together with economy and development, they must be at the forefront. And so, we are countries, but no country is an island. We must also be sensitive about the interest of the other countries, and each and everyone should be encouraged to be also sensitive of the opposite side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Esperon. One last question before we conclude this forum. Yes, the gentleman here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Captain Relly Jose Jr., an ex-seafarer. I sailed around the world for 25 years. I became a captain for 8 years, a shipbuilding supervisor in Korea and China for 5 years, before I stopped sailing at age 45 and started my own mining and ship management company here in Manila. At the moment, I am the President and CEO of GMM Global Maritime Manila and GMS Global Maritime Ship Management. I really appreciate our panels this afternoon, especially Mr. Gao and of course my very old friend Sir Lambino and of course General Esperon. We are keep on talking about peace and security, and I always believe that we need the development and the diplomacy to have that. But as a seafarer for 25 years and as a captain for 8 years, I always respect that in each country, before anything else, we have to secure our maritime territory. The Philippines is an archipelagic country with 7,600 islands. And believe me, as a captain, I observed that the Philippines do not secure our entire country with our maritime territory. We lack one, maritime buoys. We do not have that. Two, lighthouses. I hope everybody can understand what I'm talking about because I am a seafarer, I am a seaman. Would you believe, for example, that the Philippines, as an archipelagic country with 7,600 islands, we have 22 existing lighthouses. As compared to Taiwan, which is only 36,000 square kilometers, an island just north of us, they have 36 lighthouses. What is a lighthouse? As a seafarer, a lighthouse is our protection. Lighthouse is our navigational safety. Lighthouse is our peace and our security as a seafarer. This is our guide. This we do not have in our country. I feel sorry about that. I hope everybody can understand me. Philippines have 300,000 square kilometers as compared to Taiwan, which is 36,000 kilometers only. They have 36 lighthouses to protect them, to protect their country, around their country. And we are, again, I will repeat, we are 7,600 islands. We have 22 lighthouses. 22 to protect our 300,000 kilometer area. Philippines, for our information, is one of the longest with coastal areas. With a coastline, we have a coastline of 36,000 kilometers. 18,000 in the west, 18,000 in the east. How many lighthouses or how many maritime buoys do we have around the Philippines? I feel sorry about it. In the West Philippine Sea, we have 10 maritime buoys to protect the 36,000 long coastline of the Philippines. So what do we have here? Why am I talking right now, or why am I asking this in the future? My question. We are talking about the West Philippine Sea. We are talking about fighting, and then we have talking about diplomacy. We are talking about peace and security. But my question is, do we have the chance to talk about it, to talk about how to secure our own country 50, 40, 30 years ago?
Is that the question, sir?
Yes.
Yeah.
My question here is like this. Do we have a chance with, of course, now with the Philippine-China relations, do we have a chance with our colleagues to help us produce these things to protect our maritime territory? We need lighthouses, we need maritime buoys to protect this. This is our wall to protect our maritime territory. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I call President Director Dick, Secretary Esperon, sir, you remember that when you were National Security Advisor, the two of us took some helicopter rides in northern Luzon and went to some islands in northern Luzon, specifically for us to identify areas in northern Luzon where we can set up maritime buoys and lighthouses. How many lighthouses so far had been constructed during your time in these areas that we have visited in northern Luzon?
I remember 7, primarily in our positions in the South China Sea.
Yeah. At least we did try our best to
You said
respond
there
to
are
that.
10. 7 of them are in our positions. In
Yes.
the island. More.
Very important. I agree with you. The lighthouses are important structure, and in international law, that is a symbol of legitimate occupancy of your territory. Yes, sir. Please respond to the query.
Thank you. As I know, 50 years ago, or 40 to 50 years ago, the Philippines has provided a very famous international public goods for the international community related to the UNCLOS. I agree with you, the Philippines is an archipelagic state. So during the negotiation of the UNCLOS, Philippines and Indonesia provide the concept and the relative regulation of the archipelagic states and the framework of the provisions. So that is one of the important public goods contribution from the Philippine side. So right now there is a famous term, global maritime governance. From academic view, from my view, the global maritime governance is based on the internal maritime governance. So that is experience of China. In the past few years, in the past few decades, China has improved its internal maritime capabilities, including the maritime key infrastructure. So what I said, I won't focus on the sea light, the house, something like that. I would like to say China can provide much more support to Philippines to improve its maritime governance capability from the internal side. But this is dependent on a good atmosphere, especially political atmosphere, and as well as the mutual political trust. So as I know, in the past few years, China has initiated a few suggestions to make maritime cooperation, including the maritime plastic prevention and the oil prevention in the Manila Bay area. We are still waiting for the positive action of the Philippine side. So that is my opinion. Thank you.
Professor Gao, please.
Now that you mentioned the seamen from the Philippines, allow me to pay tribute to the excellent seamen from the Philippines. They are the best in the world.
Yeah.
They work the hardest, and they are the most courageous seamen in the world. You know, China is a major container port country in the world. 7 of the 10 largest container ports are in China. I understand all ports in China come across seamen from the Philippines regularly, and sometimes whenever there is a shipwreck, unfortunately, there will be Filipino casualties. So we need to really give tribute and salute the seafaring tradition of the Philippines and the excellence of the seafarers, seamen in the Philippines. And whatever China and the Philippines can do, talking about the lighthouses, let me share with you, China can build a lighthouse with the cheapest budget, with the best quality, and the best speed you can imagine. Probably the overall cost will be 1/4 of a Japanese-built lighthouse, or probably 1/5 of an American-built lighthouse. And you need so many lighthouses everywhere, almost every island, etc. So again, you identify one area of potential cooperation between China and the Philippines. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's conclusion. And thank you again for our guests. The Manila Forum, since its inception in 2021, has always taken great pride in bringing to our audiences, including the big online segment, the major issues of the day, and making sense of them through a panel of invited experts and academicians. Today, the Manila Forum continued that tradition. We focus today on a topic that's never far from most everybody's mind, that is how to ensure the continuing peace and security in the Asia-Pacific region, and in addition to what Professor Gao says, sustainable development of the area. And there are so many questions that need to be answered. We must not stop looking for answers, even if they are difficult to come by. Maraming salamat po sa inyo. Mabuhay po tayong lahat. Mabuhay ang Philippines-China relations. Dinner will be served for those who would like to stay. Yeah. Picture tayo. You want to have picture with us?
Right.